Chapter 31. Kaci sat in Sear's lap as he piloted the ship. It obeyed whatever silent command he had given and turned, heading back toward the transportation ship. I still can't believe he found me, and that he loves me. There has to be a way to get around the rules of his society, the law that forbids him to take a bride. I won't let his inability to shift determine whether we can be together or not. He dropped his hand from the silver oval and held her even more closely in his lap. After a moment, he spoke softly.
I can't believe I almost lost you. I tried so hard to keep you safe, and still you ended up in a bubble in the middle of space. He covered his face with one enormous hand.
The pain in his voice made it hard for her to take a breath, but there was so much that hadn't been said before. So much she still needed to say. I know. I heard your plan. He stiffened beneath her touch.
You did? Then why did you—
She looked up at him and lifted her good hand to sweep his blood-stained blonde hair back from his face. His deep green eyes met hers, and something powerful and unfamiliar stretched between them. The words tumbled from her lips, even while she felt lost in the depths of his gaze. Because I couldn't lose you, just like you couldn't lose me. He shook his head, his eyes wide.
But it's my job to protect you.
No, she smiled. It's our job to protect each other. He reached out and lightly touched the sling that held her injured arm. His brows drew together in an expression she'd come to realize meant he was thinking too much.
If I were your mate, it would be my responsibility. You would be my responsibility, in all ways.
She searched her brain for what he'd told her before. Sear had told her before they made love that he couldn't be with her because of some strange rule in their culture that required him to be able to shift. At that time, all she had been hoping for was that Sear might care for her enough to return her to Earth. But now, everything had changed. Even though it meant giving up Earth and never seeing her sister again, she wanted to stay with Sear. Yet was such a thing even possible? What if I want to be your mate? His arms tensed around her.
Nothing would make me happier.
But you said before—
I know what I said.
He interrupted.
And that hasn't changed. In my society, you and I can never be together.
I won't accept that. I can't. I won't be with anyone else. After everything we've been through, I won't lose him now.
There may be a way. Our world is not the only civilized one. If we snuck away, perhaps we could be together.
He paused.
It would be difficult. Not the life you deserved, but—
Unable to contain herself, she grabbed the back of his hair and pulled him into a kiss. Time stood still for one perfect moment before he stiffened beneath her touch. She pulled back, their lips parting. His eyes were closed, his expression twisted in pain. What is it? He clenched his jaw.
We can't.
He can't mean that, but he does. Tears pricked the back of her eyes. Why? You said we could sneak away before—
Your illness. The contagion. We need my people's technology to keep you well.
He's staying for me, even though he doesn't think he can be with me. She couldn't breathe. Her eyes welled with tears, even though she tried to blink them away. On Earth, the virus had kept her from love, from happiness. She couldn't believe it was doing it again. We can still find a way. His eyes opened, and the flash of pain within them sent an echoing emptiness radiating through her.
Perhaps.
He doesn't think there's a chance for us. She cupped his face in her hands. Sear, I've faced worse odds than this. I should have been dead twice already. We will find a way to be together. I didn't survive all of this to lose him. He relaxed ever so slightly beneath her touch, although his expression remained downcast.
I am a lucky male.
Yes, she smiled, curling against him. You are. And I'm a lucky woman. And no matter what you believe, I won't let anyone pull us apart. She nuzzled her nose against his neck, inhaling the spicy, exotic scent that was now more familiar to her than her own scent. Although her future was still uncertain, she held on to this moment between them, a warm stillness that was precious and fleeting. My seer, fierce in battle and tender with me, you're a dream come true. As they drew closer to the larger ship, reality began to creep back in with agonizing clarity. As much as she didn't want to go back, they had to. They both needed medical attention. Her arm still throbbed, still made her stomach turn whenever she moved it, but she also knew Seer could make it better. It was the voices that worried her, and him. Blood splattered his clothes, and even though he reassured her it was from a wound that had already been healed, his black markings were a duller color. They moved slowly along his skin, appearing almost sluggish. She might not fully understand his people or their physiology, but she recognized that he looked pained.
Stop looking at me like that.
He said, glancing down at her with a slight smile. Like what? She asked, smiling. I'm teasing him? No, I'm flirting with him. She shook her head in disbelief.
Like you think I'm about to fall over.
I would never. Unable to help herself, she reached up and dug her hand into the back of his dark hair and tugged him down for another kiss. His lips met hers, and everything faded away except him and the feel of his hard mouth crushing her own. He groaned and deepened their kiss, his tongue sweeping into her mouth. She shivered and pulled away, gasping, trying to keep a hold on her willpower as it slipped through her fingertips. We're almost back to the ship. But I've never wanted a man like this before. His deep green eyes held hers, and the desire swimming within them only made her want him more. She tangled her hand in his tan vest, her fingertips skimming over the hard hilts of his many daggers. Do we need to go back to the ship right away? He closed his eyes, and she felt the shudder that racked his body.
Don't tempt me, my sweet female.
Shifting slightly in his lap, she rubbed herself as casually as she could against the hardness of his manhood. His eyes flew open.
The board tracks are gone, but we still have Parsimon to deal with. We still need to get back to Spiritus Space if we have any hope of being safe.
He ran a hand along her side, pausing at her curves.
We have to focus on...
He groaned and ran a hand through his hair.
Hell, we can worry about all of that later. You are coming back to my room, and the second your arm is healed.
She grinned, still amazed that she could make a man like Seer aroused, that after years of not being able to have a single real relationship because of her virus, she had found him. On Earth, she probably would have settled for anyone who was kind to her. But Seer, he was an intelligent, gentle doctor, and a fierce, muscular warrior. He was everything she had ever wanted, and more. And the way he looked at her, she almost believed that she was everything he wanted too. Suddenly, a golden light came from above their view screen.
This is the Spiritus High Council. We will be docking with Transportation Ship Galaxy shortly and request an immediate meeting with the senior officers aboard the Galaxy, as well as Lord Parsimon and his senior crew members. This is not a request.
The light faded, and Kaci looked up at Seer. What does that mean? Seer scanned the view screen, then placed his hand on the silver oval. He turned the ship, and a stunning golden spaceship came into view. His expression was unreadable.
It means that the High Council has arrived to sort through this chaos, and that we're all hopefully safe from Parsimon. And that, my dear, is their ship.
And?
I am not certain.
Kaci shivered. If this was a good thing, why did she suddenly feel even more nervous? But she didn't have time to think about it because the ship beeped. Instantly, Seer accepted the incoming transmission. An older man with gray hair, large gray brows, and a gentle face came onto the view screen. His eyes widened when he caught sight of her.
You did it. You found the human.
Yes.
His arm tightened around Kaci.
Thank you for notifying me of her location. What is the status on board?
Well, we believe most of the Bortrax have left the ship. The ones who didn't leave on their own were dealt with by Leader and his warriors. Our males were incredible. We lost many good warriors, but they won against impossible odds. Leader and Gallant are doing a final sweep of the ship as we speak. But still, you should be cautious coming through the ship just in case.
Thank you. Another man spoke from somewhere off-screen.
We found another group of injured.
The old man didn't look at them.
Time to go.
The screen returned to a view of the side of their massive transportation ship as they drew closer and closer. The speed of their small craft slowed, and another person communicated with them, giving them permission to dock. A red door on the outside of the transportation ship slid open. Their tiny craft flew in and through a short tunnel into an enormous bay with a handful of crafts. These ships were much, much larger than the tiny crafts they had piloted from Earth. She was too in awe to respond. This must be where the real ships are, the Spiritus ships. Their ship was one of the smallest. It hovered over a small spot, then slowly lowered. Their ship slowed further before she felt it come to a stop. Seer lifted her in his arms and carried her to the door. Are you ready?
His voice was gruff.
She took a deep breath. I'm ready if you are. He hit the button, and the door opened. In front of them, the docking bay was poorly lit by the emergency lights. Proceeding cautiously, he carried her through the eerily empty docking bay to a metal door that exited into a familiar hall. The hallway was also empty, although the creepy red lights still flashed and the sirens still wailed. She tensed in his arms. He carried her down the hall, past docking bay door after door, and past bodies that still littered the floor. Suddenly one of the bodies groaned. Seer froze and set Kaci down, kneeling beside the body.
Leader?
His voice was filled with disbelief. Another body, so bloodied she couldn't recognize the face, moved. Seer stiffened. Gallant? His hands curled into fists. What happened? Leader's mouth worked, but for a moment no words came out. Seer leaned in closer. Kaci stood over them, clutching her hands. These men were Seer's friends, and even with their alien technology, she had no idea how they could survive the damage done to them. Tears choked her throat, and instinctually she leaned forward too.
Behind you.
Leader gurgled, blood flying from his lips. A cold hand grasped her injured arm, and suddenly she was pulled away from Seer. She turned, staring into an unfamiliar face. The man, with cruel eyes and a crueler face, smiled.
At last, my bride has been returned to me.